Okay, so by this point, she had finally realized that she wanted to just go ahead and get a mastectomy and just to cut her breast off and take care of it that way and end her pain and end her suffering. And hopefully that removed the tumor and it would have been done and over with. That's what we were hoping for, was, she had finally, come to that point. And up until then, she had been dreading, she would not even consider, she didn't want to do a lumpectomy. She didn't want to do a biopsy or a lumpectomy again because she was afraid of it metastasizing. So she put that off for over a year and a half, doing the black salve under extreme torture and extreme pain, self-inflicted, of course. But by this time, she had given up and finally decided to do the mastectomy. So I rushed her to the ER. I rushed her to the emergency room because the pain had gotten so bad. She was excruciating. She couldn't sleep at night. She hadn't been sleeping at night for about a year and a half. And she had to, it was so bad, she had to sleep. She could only sleep on her back, so sleeping just on her back. She couldn't turn to certain sides because the pain was so bad. She was doctoring this wound day in and day out, all throughout the day, changing bandages, caretaking this stuff all by herself, all on her own, for over a year and a half. And she could only take that for so long. So I finally took her to the ER. And she got the mastectomy. And that's when they finally, for the first time, gave her pathology report. And the pathology report came back that it was HER2 positive breast cancer, which I've already told you about, so I'll try not to cover that again. So that's when we finally found out, a year and a half into her journey, a year and a half later, which is far too long. And so, they had done the mastectomy, but the point that I skipped over was she had been putting it off for so long because she was so conscious about, she didn't want to be a one-breasted, woman. She didn't want to only have one breast. She was afraid of, the cosmetic, factors of it, which is... I love her so much, but it's so silly. It's so silly and it's so trivial. And she was doing that for the perception of other people. And, the only other people that would have seen it and known are, the people when we go to the hot springs, which was her favorite pastime in the entire world. She was a hot spring junkie. Our favorite, and she got me. I'd never been to hot springs before in my life, but, I love it now. I love it now. So I understand. I get it. And it's extreme. It should be a necessary protocol, a part of everyone's everyday practice. And that's why go see my hydrotherapy video on my channel. I'll probably link that in the description down below as well. But so it was purely for cosmetic reasons. It was for her self-conscious, her self-image, and she, so because she was afraid, it would make her less beautiful. And she's literally one of the most beautiful women on planet Earth, objectively, you could rank it, pretty much. And not that I would ever suggest something superficial like that, but that's how gorgeous she absolutely is. She was literally a modeling agent. She wasn't a model, but she worked for a modeling agency because of how amazing, how beautiful she was. And so she was afraid of how other people would, judge her for having one breast and for having breast cancer, which is absolutely ridiculous. But, I'm not using that. I'm not saying that, it's a flaw of hers or anything. I'm just saying it's silly. It's silly. And it's in the big picture, in the big perspective of things, it makes no difference. It does not matter. That is so silly and foolish. And because, it wasn't for me, because I could care less. She could have no breasts. I mean, and I wouldn't care. Like, she could have a penis, and I wouldn't care, and I would still love her, just the same, infinitely. Like, I don't care what her body was. I love her for her. So it wasn't for me that she was, worried about. It was for herself. It was her own self-image, her own, projections of her own self-conscious, all of that. And so she got the mastectomy, she got the pathology report back, and she also got the CT scans. They ended up having to do 2 separate scans on her, which is ridiculous because, they did the gadolinium injection, which is actually very toxic. It's extremely toxic, and it remains in your system. And I did all the research on that. I was like, look, can we do a scan without gadolinium? And they ended up saying, no, it's not as accurate. You don't get as clear of an image, and it's important that we get the clearest image possible. So again, they're basically weighing the risks to the benefits, and in this case, the benefits of getting a clear diagnosis of her cancer and all of that, as opposed to the risks of the toxicity of gadolinium from her CT scan, her MRI. But where they screwed up was they did 2 separate MRIs within a couple days, because they did one on her lower body, and then they ended up doing another one on her brain and her whole body. So they did 2 when they only needed to do 1, which is ridiculous. It's absolutely ridiculous. But again, that's not even a huge factor here. That's just something I'm pointing out. But the scans came back, and I can show you the scans here on video if I feel that's necessary, if I want to do that. And the scans came back that by the time she gave in and got the mastectomy, it had metastasized to her lymph, to 10 lymph nodes around her left breast area, her armpit area where the tumor was. And her tumor was basically, it was close to her heart, which is very telling. It was just right above her lungs, which she was a chronic cannabis smoker, and she smoked. Like, she didn't vaporize, which I told her, if she's going to be using cannabis, she needs to vaporize, because all smoke is carcinogenic, highly carcinogenic, even cannabis. Although Dr. Greger on nutritionfacts.org has a great series all about the various factors of cannabis, including the effects of tar from cannabis and cancer. It turns out cannabis resin in the lungs isn't actually hardly very carcinogenic. Could be due to the vast, profoundly anti-angiogenic and anti-carcinogenic effects of cannabis might outweigh the risks of the tar and the resins of cannabis. But so anyways, it has nowhere near the same risks as smoking tobacco does. But still, smoking has another risk in and of itself. And so she should have been vaporizing, but she wasn't. But so it was right above her heart, or right next to her heart. The heart is basically, it's in the center. Just the bottom of it juts off, off the sternum to the left-hand side. The heart's not actually located on the left side of your chest. It's located directly underneath the sternum at the center. But the bottom angle, it angles off towards the left. So her lump was down towards the bottom center of her breast, just over the bottom tip of her heart, which is very telling, because again, her heart, her sense of lack of self-love, and her lack of sense of purpose and a mission for being here, and a lack of wanting to be here, and feeling abandoned by her father and by her sister, and by feeling cast out by her sister, and being exiled, and being unloved and unseen by her previous partners, and by feeling unwanted, and just feeling abandoned all throughout her life, as well as one of her most traumatic experiences, probably the traumatic experience of her life. In high school, her ex-boyfriend committed suicide by gun, killed himself because she was Mormon, raised Mormon, so she wasn't ready to sleep with him, at that time. And, so he went out and, slept with someone else and felt extremely guilty about it, and, ended up, trying to do it to get Kristi to, come back, with him, and ended up killing himself. So probably caused her extremely deep down emotional trauma, a sense of, a lack of, who knows the amount of trauma that can create, so in her heart, storing that heart, that anxiety, that heartbreak, deep down for lifelong, probably still to this day, unresolved and unhealed. So that, again, the emotional trauma can cause the manifestation of a tumor, especially right there over the heart and over the lungs. So both of those factors probably weigh in as well. So moving on. So at this point in the hospital, she found out that it had also metastasized again to 12 spots in her lungs, a couple spots in her lungs, spot in her sternum, 10 lymph nodes, as well as 12 spots in her brain. So it had metastasized all throughout her body by this point. It was already at stage 4. Rapid, aggressive progression to stage 4, because again, it's HER2 positive, extremely aggressive. And so it's because she had waited and she didn't take my advice right from the start. She didn't listen to me. She rejected the advice, and she ended up paying the ultimate sacrifice because of that. And so she was only supposed to be, the doctors, they had told her that she was only going to be in the hospital for 2 days maximum, she got the mastectomy immediately, that night. And she was only supposed to be in there, recovering and getting her pathology report would come back. And, she was supposed to be released, basically within 2 days, the next day, pretty much. And, so prior to the surgery, they had started, and her niece was actually a registered nurse at the hospital, and it was a very thankfully she was admitted to she had a great, amazing surgeon, is absolutely one of the best in the country at what she does, an amazing surgeon. Except something that really screwed up that the surgeon did was the surgeon told her that that the cancer had metastasized to her brain. She told her that while she was wheeling her into the ER room for surgery. So that set Kristi into an immense amount of anxiety and deep set fear right before she goes into surgery, which was an absolute horrible move by the surgeon. Absolutely, that's the terrible decision. It's absolutely, there's no excuse for that. Like she couldn't tell her that it metastasized after her surgery. Like she tells her before she goes into the surgery. It's heartless. It makes no sense. So following her surgery, they had her on, our friend Rosanna, who is very informed about all of this. Thankfully, she had informed me to fill out a healthcare directive for Kristi. So I did. I printed out all the documents, all the legal documents, and I filled them out myself. And Kristi made me her legal healthcare initiative guardian, her legal advisor, so that in her incapacitation, I was the one who would make all of her life and death decisions, for her, should anything go wrong, should the surgery, go wrong, or anything, detrimental happen. I would be the one to make the decisions for her, because Kristi only trusted me to do that. She only trusted me to have that amount of depth of knowledge and research in not just the medical field, but also the legal field. Because again, because my whole family, my whole male side of my family are lawyers and are in law and practice law. And I don't myself, but I have studied my fair share of legalese and of law and contract law and things like that. So I'm pretty versed in that, and I have resources to verse myself in that should I need to. So she knew that, and she knows that I was the only one who shares her who shares her heart and her perspective and has her best interests and her wishes in mind and in heart. I was the only one who shared that with her. Not her sister, not her family. Maybe Tyler, her nephew, was probably the only other one that she would trust, but he wasn't able to be there at that time. He wasn't there, to do that. So I was there, and I was the one she trusted, and I was the one that had shared her connection, her soul connection, and shared her values and her perspectives and had her best interests at heart. Not my own interests, not what I wanted, not anything other than what she wanted, to respect her will. So she put her will in my hands, and not her sister, just to make that clear, as to who she really trusted with her life and her death. And so basically what they had her doing was they had been pumping, they decided to pump her full of, painkillers, pain medication. And Kristi we had done research, and we had been advised and been informed that, the safest and most the safest and most non-toxic painkiller is morphine, and the least addictive, because the last thing we wanted was for her to be addicted to, opiate-based or any other based chemical, synthetic-based painkillers. So, so we opted for morphine, because it's the safest, it's the cleanest, it's the least toxic. But even then, they had been pumping her full of painkillers every 2 to 3 to 4 hours maximum, like on the dot, like clockwork, constantly asking her, hey, are you ready for more pain medication? Ready for more pain medication? Ready for more pain medication? Which is fine, because of course I don't want her to be in pain. I don't want her to suffer, but I also don't want her, getting addicted to, harmful pain medications and having to detox herself off of that, going through the trauma and the suffering of having to detox off of painkillers and pain medications, or any type of pharmaceutical medication for that matter. But that's not a huge issue. That's just it's a small factor of it. But where it's a factor that builds, further on top of that, is that the problem that the painkillers, had her doped up the whole time, to where she was literally, it had her infantilized, it had her in an infantile state, extremely highly suggestible, basically it puts you under a spell. And this is why, the ancient dark occult priesthoods would use these opiate drugs and psychedelic medicines and, herbal pharmakia, which literally comes from the ancient Greek pharmakos, the pharmakia, meaning drug, witchcraft, poisoning, spell, as well as medicine, but also having the dark, sadistic connotation to it. The very origins in Greek pharmakoi, the pharmakos, human ritual sacrifice of the pharmakoi, the pharmakoi ritual, the pharmakos ritual, which I will do a whole other video on the etymology of pharmakia in the future. But so I didn't want her getting addicted to, any harmful pharmaceutical medications. Should she end up surviving her cancer, I didn't want any other complications down the line. The constant lapse of the painkillers had her doped up, infantilized. So then, in that state, she was literally zombified. She was zoned out, and and she couldn't even think, or she wasn't even lucid. She wasn't even really present or able to make, any decisions for herself. And that's why I was her, healthcare, I was her legal guardian. I was her healthcare, guardian. And of course I didn't want her to be in any more pain or any more suffering, but given what she had already endured for over a year and a half, on a level 12, on a scale of 1 to 10 in pain, she was at a level 12. Coming out of post-surgery is literally, it was nothing compared to what she had endured willfully of her own accord for over a year and a half. So it's not that would never want her to endure any suffering or pain for that matter at all. But I also don't want her, again, to become, addicted to horribly, or to get, harmful side effects from any type of, synthetic painkiller. But the morphine is fine. The morphine is okay. Just, I don't want her to constantly be, being pumped full of morphine for days on end or weeks on end, God forbid, even more. So I did take issue with that, and, I encouraged, for her to reject the pain medications. And so I had informed the nurses and the doctors, that I don't necessarily want her being pumped full of pain medications every couple hours, and they say, you have to stay on it every couple hours. You have to stay on top of it, because if you let the pain, break through, then it's harder to keep it suppressed. And I was like, bitch, you don't even know anything about the pain she's been through. You don't know. You don't even know the pain she's been through and the suffering she's been through. So, but that's not the issue. The issue is that they also, they used that infantilized state to basically, then start hooking their claws into her, basically. So she was supposed to be released after 2 days. That was when she was scheduled to be released, and they, for some reason, just kept dragging it on out. Oh yeah, we're still waiting for your pathology report. We're still waiting for, whatever. I don't know what they were waiting on. What they were waiting on was for the doctors to basically come in and make a organized plan for her, a plan of action, a plan for a course of action, which is, to put her on chemo and radiation immediately. So that's what they wanted. They wanted to capitalize on her infantilized state while she's highly suggestible under the drugs, the influence of the drugs, to be able to get her, to keep her. Their goal, they're a hospital, they're a business. Their goal is to keep her in that hospital until she dies in that hospital under their care. Their goal is to keep her in the hospital under their care and drag it out as long and milk that train, that cancer medication and that cancer treatment and that chemotherapy, those chemotherapy grants and those chemotherapy pharmaceutical and the chemotherapy money to keep flowing in. So that's what they do. That's what the hospital system, the medical industrial complex, that's what it does. Is it's sick care. It's not health care. It's not designed to make you healthy and to keep you well. It's designed to keep you as a recurring customer. So they wanted to keep her in that hospital for as long as possible. They wanted her to do the treatments there. They wanted her to stay there and to do their treatments for as long as absolutely possible until she ends up dying, in that hospital. And I saw that coming from a mile away. It was very obvious. And, I knew that if they had kept her in that state, that she was going to die in that hospital. And that's the last thing that she wants. Kristi was, she was terrified of being in that hospital, even though it was a very nice facility. This was Sutter Health in Santa Rosa, very nice facility, and the staff was truly amazing. They were a great staff, and they were incredibly kind and courteous and very accommodating to all of her. And they had a good plant-based vegan a kitchen menu. So, she had good food. She had good vegan food, whole plant foods. So she was getting good food. And so it was a 5-star hospital. It was a great hospital. But it's just the hospitals themselves. It's the hospital system. It's a very sad environment. It's a very bad environment. I mean, let alone just the fluorescent lighting, throughout that whole building, EMF radiation. You've got the mercury and the halogen lights emitting EMFs all throughout the building. You've got the Wi-Fi repeaters all throughout the building. So just the hospital environment is incredibly detrimental to overall health and to well-being. So especially for recovery. And so they also had basically prescribed, their plan of action was to immediately put her on Keppra. And I've covered this in some of my I talked about this briefly in one of my other videos. So they put her on the pharmaceutical drug Keppra, which I didn't even approve of. They basically went ahead and did it without my consent and without her consent either. They just put her on this drug without anyone's consent, which is fraud, essentially. It's medical malpractice. And so she had been on the Keppra, and immediately after being on the Keppra, and so this is a huge aspect of it, was it's an anti-seizure medication, because they were worried that the tumors, that the spots in her brain were going to cause seizures, and so they wanted to do this as a preventative measure to keep her on the Keppra to prevent any seizures from occurring, even though she had no signs, no symptoms, no inclination that she would ever even have seizures. In fact, I'll show you the video of the radiologist showing her that the placement of the tumors had no impact on any of her vital structures in her brain that would even suggest that there was a possibility of her having seizures, other than just the fact that there were lesions in her brain. Which, don't get me wrong, there's good reason for, I'm not disagreeing with that. I mean, that makes perfect sense. Of course, you want to prevent seizures, but she was thinking, and as well as I was thinking, that we would cross that bridge when it came to it. And of course, it is dangerous, to have even just a single seizure. And, they were worried about, what if it happens when you're alone and everything. And that's the thing, she was never alone. Like, it was literally, I was with her 24/7, constant. I was always by her side, or if not me, someone else was, Tyler or her nephew or someone else was with her. So like, she was never just alone anymore at this point. But so I did the actual research. I don't just trust, so I asked him up front. I asked him, what are the detriments of Keppra? What are the side effects? What are the detriments? What are the risks? What are the benefits? Are the risks worse than? Do the risks outweigh the benefits, or do the benefits outweigh the risks? And the doctor, Dr. Hashimoto, he told me, he tried to tell me like he knew something, but he didn't know. Had no idea. He had no idea what any of the research was on it, but he said, I can go back and I can, gather the research for you, and I can show you some of the research on it. And even then, most of the pharmaceutical research for these pharmaceutical drugs is actually conflict of interest. It's published and it's published by and funded and published by the pharmaceutical companies themselves. So it's a huge conflict of interest, which is very widespread and very rampant in the medical, industrial, pharmaceutical complex. And so, of course, I didn't trust that. So I went and did my own research. And of course, I know it's the big thing. Oh, everyone's a health expert now. Oh, you've got your degree from Google. So of course, I understand that, and that's valid. That's legitimate. It's true. Everyone does think they're an expert, and they do think that they know. Laymen and lay people and ignoramuses do think that they know more than the highest quality evidence and the experts in the field. So I completely agree with that sentiment, but I agree with that mostly from the sense of like the carnivore dieters, and the flat earthers, all of these. It's Dunning-Kruger effect. Go back and see my previous films all about that, about the health and diet and nutrition. Is that I completely understand that. But so what I did was I went and did the research myself and looked up, what Keppra is, what it does, what the actual chemical structure of the drug is, what the long-term effects are, what the side effects are. And there's a whole website dedicated to just the personal testimonials and the anecdotal experiences, which isn't exactly the highest available evidence either, but it plays a huge factor in considering the risks to the benefits. Especially since Dr. Hashimoto did not show me any research. He didn't even voluntarily provide full disclosure. I had to go out of my way to press him to ask him what the risks of these drugs were, which is a crime in and of itself right there. That's a crime. That's fraud right there. That's malpractice. You can't just, prescribe drugs or even recommend drugs without also upfront, outright disclosing full disclosure of the procedure or of the drug or of the treatment plan that you're recommending, which he did not. I had to press him for that. And of course I did so politely. I'm not rude or anything. I'm just being stern here because this is, I don't know, it's important stuff. So, But so he said that he would go back, and he said, oh, well, there's really not really any risks for it. It's pretty harmless, and there might be some side effects occasionally, but they're very rare and few and far between. And he basically just gave me, he basically just brushed me off. He gave me some sort of crappy explanation, and but that's not what is required. What is required is documents in hand, research in hand. Show me the evidence. Show me the study. Show me the studies. Show me all the evidence. Show me the totality of the evidence on it. I want to know. I want to know it all. I want to decide for myself. I want to make informed decisions. I do not trust authority, any authority, not experts, not, even though their expertise is legitimate, sure. But he's an internist. He didn't even know the actual site, or maybe he did. Maybe it's not just him. Maybe it's, internists in general. They do know, or maybe he did know and just chose deliberately to withhold, disclosing the detriments of it, which is malpractice. That is medical fraud right there. That's a crime. Especially withholding vital information, important life and death information. And so what I found on this website, I will show you this, is hundreds upon hundreds of personal testimonials and personal anecdotal experiences of that the drug causes extreme fear, extreme aggression, extreme anxiety, extreme chronic suicidal depression. Not only that, some said it even caused them seizures where they hadn't had any before. An anti-seizure medication actually inducing seizures, causing the condition that it's supposed to prevent. But most importantly, the aggression, which is very important because Kristi's mom had also at the same exact time had just undergone brain surgery to remove a non-malignant, it wasn't cancerous, to remove a non-malignant tumor from her brain. And so she was actually on Keppra as well. She was already on Keppra, and we ended up later on staying with her mom, and so I experienced this firsthand. It was the mood swings and the aggression was extreme. It was extreme irritability and extreme aggression and hostility is the side effect of this drug, and that's what it was causing in her mom. She was extremely hostile towards me, particularly. I guess maybe it's because she doesn't trust me, or or any other reason, but it causes extreme hostility. That's what the drug does, and that's what it did, and that's what it did for countless personal anecdotal testimonies documented on this website. And so not only that, I just saw the way it was making her act, and it was literally, it caused even more. It caused her even more infantile. It infantilized her even more. So it made her basically an invalid. She was just completely almost unconscious. Like she was just out of it. She was just, she couldn't think, she couldn't function, she couldn't operate. She literally had her in an infantile state. They could literally, at that point, they could literally do anything to her. Like they could convince her of absolutely anything. And that is why it's so critical to always have someone that you really trust and who has your best interest at heart, and always fill out a legal healthcare initiative, a healthcare directive, anytime before you ever even have the risks of some sort of health condition like that happening. It's important that you fill out a healthcare initiative and assign someone to be your to be your representative before anything like that happens. In the case that you ever go into a coma or something like that, so that they can't harvest your organs while you're still alive, and which is basically torture. It happens very often, and all sorts of medical malpractice and things like that. Iatrogenic causes are the third leading cause of death in the United States. Death by doctor, death by medical malpractice, death by misdiagnosis, death by misprescribing drugs. It's very rampant and it's very dangerous. Doctors are the third leading cause of death in the United States. That's a fact. That's a statistic. And that's not to say that doctors are doing this deliberately. Sure, there are actually very many that are out there that are doing this. And it turns out that there are actually many doctors, coroners, nurses that are actually involved in satanic covens. And I know this sounds absolutely ridiculous and conspiratorial, but that's a true fact. I mean, there are whistleblowers who have actually, been involved in high-level satanic covens and high-level satanic groups, as well as ritual abuse groups who, they have very qualified experts. They have psychologists, psychiatrists. These are Dr. Death type people. So there are, I'm not saying that, not making blanket statements. Do not, fear all doctors. That's part of the reason why Kristi is in the position that she had been put in, is because she, was irrationally afraid of doctors and all of this. And it's true, but you can't just blanket statement things. You have to, you have to get into it. But the point of all of this is that, I didn't like the way the drug was making her feel. And if they had kept her on it, she would have stayed in that hospital for, and she would have died in that hospital. And this was very important back then because, back then we thought that there was still actually a chance that she could survive, that she could beat it, so we didn't want her to die in that hospital. She did not want to be in that hospital. She did not want to die in that hospital. Nobody wanted her to die in a hospital. And that was not her wish, and that's her wish that I upheld for her. She told me that, and she had written that down in the legal document. In fact, they tried to actually not even do anything with the healthcare directive that I had told them to file. I told them to file it, make copies of it, deliver it, to give me the copy back, and for them to put that directive on file. And they tried to not even do that. They tried to ignore it. They tried to ignore it so that they could continue on with whatever they wanted to do for her. But I had to continually remind them, who are you going to file? Are you going to file this healthcare directive yet? And they're, oh yeah, we're gonna get our legal person to file it for you. And it was finally literally the very last day that she was being discharged, which was over 7 days later. It was over a week later. She was only supposed to be in there for 2 days, was when they scheduled her to be released. They were trying to keep her in that hospital for as long as they could so they could get her on the drugs and get her on the chemo and the radiation and all of that stuff and keep her in there until she died in that hospital. And I was not going to have that. Kristi did not want that. That was the last thing she wanted. She told me that specifically. That's why she was so afraid to get a biopsy and to go to the hospital to begin with. But there's no reason to be afraid, especially not when you have someone trusted that can care for you and take care of you and make sure that your best interests are upheld. So that's basically the story. And there's more to it. There is more to it. All of the doctors, all of the nurses, her entire family, other than Tyler, some of her good friends, Sean and everyone, they all had this like since day one, they had this harsh judgment against me, probably because I'm vegan, and they were all against veganism. Like they thought it was insane and ridiculous and it was dangerous and everything. And because they do no research, they literally do zero homework, they know nothing about nutritional science, and they don't know the facts, they don't know the evidence, they can't put up or shut up. And the last thing they want to do is they want to debate the facts, and actually they're not even debate, just discuss, just go through and let's look at the evidence, let's show what all it says. This is what I do for my career, my profession. And I'm not a healthcare professional by any means, but I defer to the research itself, to the literature, and I defer to the actual experts who are publishing and who are reviewing and analyzing the clinical science. I only show the highest quality experts and the highest quality evidence available, and it's about the evidence itself, not about appealing to authorities. So they all had this perspective against me, like I was like controlling Kristi's. I was this, like a dark mind manipulator, putting all these, conspiracy ideas in her mind. And the truth is the exact opposite of what everyone had been projecting onto me. I was the one who told her to get a biopsy right from the start. She would have been done. It would have been cured right from the start, easily, quickly, relatively cheaply, much cheaper than it ended up being. I mean, it all could have been prevented. But, they all had this idea, probably from the beginning, like it was probably the veganism, like they, and I never convinced Kristi of anything. As I've just told you, she didn't take my advice on anything. She would not listen to anyone other than herself. And she did listen to Rosanna as well, but she would not listen to hardly anyone other than her. She only listens to personal stories because, she listens to things that resonate with her, which is not how you come to the truth. You never go by what resonates with you. Because the things that don't resonate with you and make you feel bad, that's called cognitive dissonance. You don't judge life and death health decisions based on what makes you feel good. Because of the fact that, cognitive dissonance, the truth hurts. It will upset you. It will not resonate with you. Especially if you're deep in mind control, in social programming, social engineering, from decades of propaganda, centuries of propaganda, health and nutritional propaganda, pharmaceutical industry propaganda, the very first types of Rockefeller Foundation medical industrial complex of the DuPont Dow chemical oil industry, which produces all these petrochemicals for the pharmaceutical industry, the Rockefellers, the oil industry, oil, agriculture, pharmaceutical industry, the medical industrial complex. They're the ones that designed all of this. And so anyways, they had all assumed that, I was putting all these conspiracy theories and controlling her mind and, telling her to ignore all Western medical treatments and to only do holistic stuff. And the truth is the exact opposite. Right from the beginning, I told her to get a biopsy. So then, if necessary, she could do the targeted chemotherapy, if necessary, as an adjuvant to all the alternative holistic therapies available, the most effective treatments available. Hyperthermia, Coley's toxins, ozone therapy, if not necessary, or if even possible, an intravenous vitamin C, the diet protocol, the detox protocol, as well as the fasting protocol, True North Health Clinic, and all of these other holistic treatments combined so that it mitigates and it diminishes and it minimizes the harmful and detrimental effects of the toxic chemotherapy and radiation, so that the Herceptin and Perjeta could, and I was never against her taking Herceptin and Perjeta. Right from the beginning, once we found out it was HER2 positive and how effective those two drugs are for that, for her condition, I was on board. I was like, look, we need to stop it, and then we can also hit it hard with all the holistic treatments. And the doctors, the nurses, since I basically just didn't want her to take the Keppra, that's the only thing I didn't want her to take, because it was unnecessary. I mean, sure, there's a possibility that somewhere down the line she could, have a seizure, and of course I don't want that, but also the cannabis oil is probably far more effective at preventing seizures, is proven to cure and prevent seizures, than the Keppra probably ever will be. And not only that, the Keppra has dramatically the Keppra, the detriments far outweigh the benefits, especially in her case because she didn't need it. She was not at risk of having, she was potentially at risk of having seizures somewhere down the line. Potentially, possibly. It's a possibility. There was no guarantee of that. And it hadn't ever come to that. She had no symptoms, no signs of that even being a possibility. So again, just the detriments were outweighing the whatever benefits may have been there. Plus, I really didn't like the way that it was making her, and she was not able to function. She wasn't able to speak or act or barely even get up or, operate on her own. She lost all basic, autonomous function. And that scared me. That scared me because I immediately saw that if she continued on that drug, she would die in that hospital, because had her under their influence. And, so that's the only thing that I didn't want her to do. I just didn't want her to do, harmful pharmaceutical painkillers, because I didn't want her to get addicted, and I didn't want her to get horribly addicted to, this harmful drug Keppra. And that's it. I advised her to get a biopsy. I advised her to go, to the hospital to get, diagnosed immediately, right from the start. And, I never forced her to go vegan. I never forced her to do anything. I couldn't force her even if I wanted to. She did everything of her own free will choice. I've only ever been there to educate, inform, and inspire, and to just simply be her advocate, her health advocate, and her researcher, her trusted advisor, and her closest friend, and her closest confidant. And that's what I was for her. But her whole family, they think that, as well as the nurses and the doctors and everyone, they thought that, I was putting these ideas in her head, and I was the reason why she had got cancer to begin with. They probably think that it was the vegan diet that caused her cancer, which is complete bullshit. It's the complete opposite of the truth, of what all the science shows us. Okay, so I'm sorry that this has gone on so long, and I've rambled, and I've mixed things up, and I've taken probably convoluted things probably way more than it needs to be. But so let's get in and wrap up. We're approaching the end of Kristi's journey at this point, and we're reaching the end of her story. And so since she had waited so long and ignored all advice and all evidence, and instead just did all the exact opposite things of what a reasonable, logical, and accurate evidence-based decision would be. She did the exact opposite of all of that and went entirely against all of my recommendations, which would have saved her life had she listened. Not just to me. I'm not saying that, I'm correct, that it's just I'm right and everything. I mean, I was right every step of the way, whereas everyone else around me was wrong every step of the way, except for, her family being right at the beginning, where they were saying, yeah, you need to go to the hospital and find out what what it is. We all agree on that, except for Kristi, and her friends who had advised her not to get a biopsy, because, they assumed that, so this is where the lesson comes in, is that not all cancers are the same. Not all cases are the same. You can't use anecdotal evidence, to advise other people what to do based on your personal experience. You do not ever do that, ever. I mean, it can help. I mean, stories can help, to a certain extent, but it's not something that you use to make your decisions upon. I mean, you can listen to other people, listen to all stories, listen to all evidence, listen to all anecdotal evidence as well. But one anecdote or a few anecdotes is just anecdotal evidence. It's just stories. It's not real science. So I believe this brings us full circle to present day, to where she is at now, which is she had let it progress to the point to where it metastasized to stage 4, within a year and a half, by foregoing any actual evidence-based, science or course of action, prognosis, any actual real plan of action. From denying that got her to stage 4. And so it's true, you can't put it off, but don't also jump at, the doctors scaring you into jumping into chemo and radiation and drugs immediately, because that's what they do. That's what they will try to do. And it's important to take urgent action and to be swift but again, be real, be logical, be rational about this. Take about 2 weeks to about 6 weeks at the most. No longer than that. Unless when you find out you have it, unless it's already, very far along. If it's, again, no blanket statements. If it's far along and when you find it and when you first somehow find out, then you probably don't have much time to, think on it and to make, to deliberate your course of action. So in that case, your choices are more limited. But always take some time to gather information and decide what the best course of action is. You got to do integrative. You got to measure the best of both worlds and combine them. You have to merge the two, make the two as one. And so Kristi did decide, given, the severity of her condition, she did decide to go ahead, and I had no influence over this. It was entirely her decision. By this point, I had just wanted her to find out what it is and to do that. After that, I can't inform, I can't make her decisions for her. I can only encourage and inspire and and provide research for her to make her own informed decisions, which is all we can ask for in life, is to make our own informed decisions. And so she did decide to do the Herceptin and Perjeta, and she did decide to do the chemo, and she did end up doing directed, targeted radiation therapy to her brain. She did 6 rounds of Herceptin and Perjeta, or was it 3 months of Herceptin and Perjeta, 6 cycles, I think it was. And she was scheduled to do 10 rounds of targeted, of whole brain radiation. Like, they just blasted her brain with radiation. And she was terrified, and she just wanted me to be with her through that radiation treatment. She was so afraid of what would happen, of losing her, again, cosmetically, of losing her hair and all of that stuff. And she's beautiful, so of course we didn't want her to lose her hair, but that doesn't matter. You can always find cosmetic ways around that. But so she ended up doing all that, and she did the best she could, but it got the best of her. And as even with the healthy lifestyle and protocol, also I need to point this out, the most important aspect of health and lifestyle and medicine, lifestyle medicine, nutrition and prevention, as well as curing and reversing, is exercise. Exercise is the most important. Diet and lifestyle is huge. It's foundational. But exercise is the most important factor for everything, for maintaining bone density, especially for women with breast cancer, because estrogen-driven cancers, it can weaken the bones, and it can cause osteoporosis, and so it's important. You have to maintain muscle mass and bone density in order to beat cancer, to beat the shit out of it, and to win. Is you have to stay strong. You have to stay active. And one of the reasons why, Kristi got in all of this ever to begin with was because of sedentary, inactivity. And the reason why is because of over 15 years of Epstein-Barr virus, and chronic depression. So both of those will also cause, chronic fatigue and inactivity and lethargy. And so I had been, ever since day one, I was trying my best to motivate her and encourage her and inspire her to get up with me and come to the gym, and let's go out for a walk, let's go out in nature, let's go hike, let's go to the beach, let's walk on the beach, let's go for a run on the beach, let's go for a swim, let's go to the gym, let's go sweat. And we routinely went to the hot springs and did hydrotherapy, which is always a pleasure, always a joy. That was the love of her life, was hot springs. I mean, she wanted to live at Harbin Hot Springs if she could, and we considered that, that was what she wanted to do. But no matter how hard I tried, I mean, I was able to get her to get up and go to the gym with me and to work out for a little while, for a brief period of time there, before she ever got cancer. And that was a beautiful time. I mean, it was fun. We would go sweat every day routinely. We would always at least go sweat. And sometimes she would do some workouts. She would do leg workouts and, lift a little bit of weight and, but not much. And, one of the best things I did was I bought her basically a vibrational platform. It's called, the brand we got was an Access Plate. It's, it shakes you. She called it the rump shaker. And it literally, it just shakes. So it's best for the lymphatic system. It keeps you got to keep that lymph flowing as well as the blood to keep the oxygenating the cells and delivering nutrition into the cells, and the lymphatic system eliminating waste out of the cells. So that's crucial. That's important. And that's why exercise is the key, because you have to maintain muscle mass for strength, and you have to maintain bone density for strength as well if you want to beat cancer. And so that's the most important part of recovery and for beating cancer. And that's the part that, I was able to get her up and go out walking with me, occasionally, some of the time, but it wasn't anything consistent. And, she was so stubborn. She never, the hardest thing was, the hardest thing for me to see was that she was just so lethargic. She just, she never really did a whole lot other than, just relax and rest. And, she was always just saying how much she just needed rest. And I knew, and everyone else backs her up on that, just back off. She needs to rest. And she did the same thing with the exercise as she did with the cancer, advising. What she would tell me, I know this, just stop. I know what to do. Like, I know I need to exercise. I know what's best. Don't tell me what to do or what's best. And I was like, I'm not telling you what to do. I'm telling you why it's so important we have to exercise, because, she was always saying, well, I'm too tired. I don't have the energy to go for a walk right now. I don't have the energy. I just trust me, my body needs rest. It needs to rest. And that's not true. Your body doesn't need to rest. it needs to rest when you're sleeping. It doesn't need to rest all day long, every day. The more, that's what happens. It's the two sides of physics, entropy and syntropy or negentropy, life and death, growth, regeneration, and decay and degeneration. Two forces of life. If you are not putting in the work, keeping in motion, life is motion. When things stop moving, that's death. That's what we call death. It's what we call rest. Returning to inertia. You are inert, meaning you're not moving. That is the eternal stillness. That is called death. That is the return to source, the return to the universal stillness of the stillness of the fulcrum of creation. So when you rest, you're in for the long rest, you're in for the eternal rest. And I saw that coming, ever since the beginning, like ever since I first met her, was the biggest thing that I feared, for her, was I knew that if she didn't get up and keep moving, and I tried with all my heart, with all my ability, with all my purpose and passion and research and love, as I tried to inspire her, to be her coach and to keep her motivated to keep moving, to keep going. Because the thing about exercise is it builds energy. It's a cycle. It's a circuit. The more you do, the stronger you get, the more energy you get. Your muscles are literally a battery. Your body is an electric capacitor. It stores the electrical energy of the forces of nature, of the universe itself, the electric universe. The more life you have in your physical body is the more spiritual you become. If you consider yourself a spiritual person and you're not focusing on your physical strength and your fitness and your health and your nutrition, you're not a spiritual person. Period. You may think you are, but you're not. You have the spirit, the embodiment of God is embodying eternal spirit, as much spirit into this physical world, into this physical life, into this physical body as possible. That's the goal of spirituality. True ascension and true spiritual evolution and growth is to make the universal energy and store as much of it inside our body as we possibly can, to store as much electrical energy in our cells and in our muscle tissue as we possibly can. The way you do that is through fitness, diet, exercise, lifestyle, and nutrition. That's the way you cure and you prevent and you beat cancer. And this is where I've said my final goodbyes to my dearest love, my beloved, the love of my life, my sweet Kristi. She was, her stubbornness and her beautiful stubbornness, and the hardest thing for her was she had to come to terms and forgive herself from learning all of these hard lessons the hardest way possible. She took the hardest road. She chose literally the hardest path that anyone could possibly choose. She chose the hard road. And that's fine. That's fine. That's okay. Some of us need the hard lessons to learn, to truly learn what is best, and to be able to share that knowledge with others. And through her sacrifice, I'm now able to impart this knowledge onto everyone that is able to hear it. And that's why Kristi's story needs to be told. And again, you can watch her story from her own mouth. I'll share the link to her channel. You can see her videos, and she never got to finish telling her story. So that's what my goal with all of this was. And I hope it helps so many people out there, and I hope it prevents this from ever happening to anyone else. Again, please take care of yourselves. And then we begin to decline back into a childlike, we decline into an elderly state, into an aging process. And through Kristi's, I witnessed the whole thing very rapidly. It was on fast forward. I watched her go from the peak of her beauty and vitality and life within her to very rapidly aging, to becoming very rapidly aged in a very short period of time, and then to very rapidly declining back into an infantile state, back into her infancy, and then to be reborn again into the unity of the oneness. And that's what life is. It's a cycle of life and death and rebirth and regeneration and renewal. And I witnessed it firsthand very rapidly, seeing Kristi's progression. And I've had to say I've said my final goodbyes to my beloved Kristi. And I ask you all to be with me and to be with her now. And please pray for her. Because as of right now, as far as I know, she's still with us. And she's still in her final moments as of the point when I'm making this video. I'm not sure about once this video gets uploaded. I'm not sure if she will still be with us at that point. But please pray for me, and please pray for her anyways. Please pray for yourselves and take care of yourselves. And that's the story of my beloved Kristi Walton, my Kristi Bluestar. I love you so much, and you're with me always. And your story will hopefully help so many others to not make the same mistakes, that you've had to learn the hard lessons, and you've walked the hard road for all of us to learn from. And your sacrifice will never be forgotten. And we love you infinitely. We're always with you. You're always with us. Thank you so much. I love you. And another thing that I wanted to speak upon was something that I realized, that I witnessed through this whole life lesson. The most meaningful life lesson that I've learned through all of this is, aside from infinite compassion and gratitude and love and forgiveness and acceptance and healing through all of this, is that life is a cycle and it's a journey, and it's one where we are born, we grow to the pinnacle of our strength and our vitality, My name is Cullen Smith. This is Lifting the Veil. You can find all of my full books, presentations, videos, films, articles, posts at patreon.com/liftingtheveil. And there is also a ton of exclusive content, and I will leave the cited reference links in the description down below. So you can check that out for all of my full content, and I will see you guys in the next video. I rely solely on word of mouth, and the recommended algorithms are not recommending any of my videos or films anymore. My channel has literally been completely restricted, so I rely on your help by sharing my work around if you appreciate it, and leave me your comments. I definitely want to know what you have to share and what you have to think about all of this stuff, and I will see you in the next video.